One of the challenges when it comes to authentication is actually how to do the authentication. In other words, how to pass messages back and forth from a client to some sort of authentication server. Now, there have been a number of authentication protocols. For example, there's the password authentication protocol, or PAP. There's the challenge handshake authentication protocol, or CHAP. There's Microsoft's version of the challenge handshake authentication protocol, or MS-CHAP. There's also the lightweight extensible authentication protocol, which is LEAP. So there have been a lot of different authentication protocols over a long period of time. There is also one extensible authentication protocol, which isn't really a protocol as much as it is a framework, meaning that it defines a set of messages. It doesn't actually define how to transport those messages. Those are defined in the individual implementations of the extensible authentication protocol. For example, we've got EAP-TLS, which means you're transporting this authentication protocol across a transport layer security connection. So it's encrypted using TLS, and we are passing the authentication messages over this TLS connection. Now, there's also EAP MD5, which uses MD5 to make sure that there hasn't been any sort of attack against the authentication messages to begin with. There's EAP PSK using a pre-shared key for session key derivation, and also to make sure that the two ends have determined that it's okay to talk to one another. In other words, if they both have this pre-shared key, then somebody at some point has configured them to know about one another. They have the pre-shared key, and there's some sort of assumption there that the two ends can be trusted. So you can see that there are a lot of different implementations of EAP based on the specific needs that are available. The reason we're talking about EAP is that EAP is actually the authentication framework or authentication protocol that has been adopted by the Wi-Fi Alliance, and it's been defined as the authentication protocol. So they use EAP, and one of a wide variety of versions of EAP. There is also an implementation of EAP that goes over local area networks, and that's actually defined as 802.1x, meaning that we are doing this authentication protocol or extensible authentication protocol over a local area network. It's also called EAP whole. So we've got a wide variety of authentication possibilities depending on how we actually want to transmit the messages. But ultimately, all of those are defined by this set of messages that have been defined in the extensible authentication protocol. All of the rest of it just has to do with how we get those messages back and forth from one end to another, whether it's encrypted, unencrypted, whether there is authentication on both ends, whether there's not authentication messages on both ends or not. There are a lot of considerations when it comes to transmitting authentication messages from one end to another. And we need to take into consideration that we are passing highly sensitive information back and forth, but we are using the extensible authentication protocol, and we're also using some other transport in order to get those messages from the client to the server that's actually doing the authentication.